Hi, I'm Steve Spencer from SMB Capital. In today's video, we discuss how to short a momentum stock. This is one of the trickier setups for short-term traders. It has eliminated or placed many in the penalty box for a long period of time. Let's figure out how to trade this setup responsibly together. So we've taken 2 hours of our training. We've put together a free workshop. In this workshop, you will learn our proprietary stock selection methods, which we use on a daily basis to find the best risk to reward in-play stocks. Also, there are 3 very good risk reward setups that we use on our prop desk in New York City. So if you want to find out how to do these trades and our stock selection process, click on the link above. Trading on the short side can be very tricky. We teach our traders, because of this, how to identify the backside. It's an approach that reduces drawdowns, and it's also an approach that will be applicable to the vast majority of setups. You're not going to miss too many reversals by waiting for the backside to set up. So why don't we go in and take a look at a recent example that I was involved in and really dig down deep into the details of where the trade initially sets up and how to follow through over the next couple of days with the trade. After we've identified a stock that's a momentum stock that we believe is getting overextended, we want to go through point by point how to find the backside. And this can be very tricky, as I already mentioned. So the first thing we're looking for is the acceleration of the trend. So I'm going to show you a few charts, what this looks like. And by the way, this isn't just applicable to momentum stocks. This is also applicable to the market in general, or big cap stocks or small cap stocks. This is a simple technique that you can use in all different types of setups that are getting overextended. Why don't we take a look at one of these charts and see what it looks like. So here's the CRON, C-R-O-N, the daily, which we're going to talk about in detail. But here's what it looks like on the daily. It was trending higher. It broke out above $16. And then the trend started to accelerate over a period of a few days. It moved up basically 50% over a 4-day period. And basically what happens when a trend accelerates, the buyers are getting more and more aggressive. And they get so aggressive to the point where as soon as it starts to move lower, it can't sustain this steep uptrend. And then we start to look for it to approach that more shallow uptrend over the following few days. And I just wanted to give you another example. As I mentioned, this could apply to the market, to large cap stocks. Here's an example of the SPY. We look at the daily chart. This was grinding higher last year, very, very slowly. And then all of a sudden we can see the trend got steeper and moved from 270 to 286 over the course of a few weeks before it broke that steep uptrend. And we know what the rest was history. Over the next week, it came down like a ton of bricks. So I just wanted to point out to you, although we're talking about shorting momentum stocks today, and one of the ways that we look to identify this setup is when the trend accelerates to the upside, then we're looking for very specific signals intraday, and we'll look at those charts as well. And the reason we're looking for those signals intraday is we need levels to trade against. When a stock starts to get steeper on an uptrend, it can just continue to go straight up to the point where it can sometimes double or triple over a period of a few days. And so we want to see on the lower time frame, sellers step in, a pullback, and then we have levels to trade against. So let's zoom in on CRON, which I just showed you on the daily. Here's a 10-minute chart of CRON. Notice that over the course of a couple of days, it was moving sideways at $18. It moved up to 20 and then broke out above 20. Finally, this came to my attention when a junior trader on the desk, when it got above 24, and said, Steve, this stock is starting to get vertical. What do we mean by vertical? Stocks have a certain amount that they'll move each day. In the case of CRON, it'll move about $1 to $2. And if you can see over this few day period, it moved from 18 to 20, 20 to 22. Then one morning on the open, it moved very quickly above 22 to above 24. This caught our attention. It's now moved up 50% from that $16 on the breakout on the daily I showed you, the daily chart. You can see here over a few days, it went up from 16 to 24. And the trend is really starting to accelerate on the lower time frame intraday. So let's zoom in, more zoomed in fashion, to the day that it actually got above 24. When the junior trader, is also my assistant, brought it to my attention, what I said was, okay, let's start scaling into the trade. And what that means is putting on a small amount of shares. In this case, it was at 24.50, put in a small amount of shares, put on some more shares into 25, and then we'll see if it actually shows signs of topping out here. And again, as we look at this, look at this 10-minute intraday chart, you notice on the open, the stock started the day below $22 a share. It moved up on the open to 22.70, it looks like, sideways, and then had these big bars where it accelerated to the upside, moving about an ATR, one ATR, which is the amount that it moves generally in a 24-hour period, in the course of about 30 minutes. And that was my signal to initiate the position. You can see actually when we initiated the position, it very quickly came down about 70 or 80 cents. And then over the next 20 minutes, tested the high, got a little bit above the high, got to 25. And then the area I circled there, this is what I call topping action. It took out the morning high, very quickly came down below the morning high, which had been about 24.70, and started to hold below. So on a very low time frame, on the lower intraday time frame on this 10-minute chart here, what we noticed is it made a new high, closed below the new high on the 10-minute, and then starts to move sideways below the initial morning high. So at this point, I thought it was such a good setup, I actually tweeted out on Twitter and StockTwits, CRON top coming to a theater near you shortly. And what I was basically saying, and I showed all three time frames here, was this stock had been trending higher in the daily, started to accelerate, and on the intraday time frame was showing some topping action, and I felt comfortable enough, I tweeted this out around 1:30 p.m., I think it was the stock was around $24.60, that you could start to look, if this failed here, and started to come off, we were looking at a large downside potential. And what also I liked about sharing the stock is, this is a stock that trades over 20 million shares a day, so some of these stocks, the momentum stocks that have lower volume, are much riskier. Although this can move quite a bit, can move $1 very quickly or even $2 very quickly, because it trades over 20 million shares, two things. Number one, you can get out quite easily. And number two, you can actually put on a very large position. For example, just looking at this on the 10-minute as it's starting to top here at 24, between 24.5 and 24.70, each of those bars, even as the volume's coming down, you can look at those volume bars, it's doing over $1 million shares every few minutes. And so this is a stock that more experienced traders can put on a 30, 40, 50,000 share short position and know that they can get out of it pretty quickly. So that's the first chart I wanted to show you. The next chart I wanted to zoom in. This is giving us the clue that the sellers on a lower time frame are starting to take a little bit of control. And on the 30-minute, on the daily, this is people on the higher time frame, people that are swing long this, on the breakout above 16 or the breakout above 20, they're not even paying attention. But for us, for short-term intraday traders, we're starting to get signs that this is the beginning potentially of a pullback to those areas where the higher time frame traders, the swing traders, are going to get concerned. And those traders, I'll explain to you in the coming slides, how we'll use that information to actually manage risk on this trade and potentially trade it for further downside in the days to come. So we're on day one, it's potentially topped out here at 25. When it gets to 25 here on the 5-minute, notice the next bar, boom, is right back down below 24.70. The reason this is important, and what I said to the junior trader on the desk who brought the stock up to me was, as it was moving higher, first it topped out initially at 24.70. Then when it got to above 24.70, I noticed that they were just holding the bid there. And so what I had said to him is, as it's moving to 25, if it starts to hold below 24.70, we could get a quick move back down to 24. That will be our first signal. If people start to buy it at 24 and it works its way back up to 24.70 and can't get above there, this might be the beginning of the end. And so we're looking at the 5-minute chart right now. First 5-minute bar comes down into 24.50. The next 5-minute bar, boom, you can see it comes down at 24. And this is the point where I know that if it pops back up to 24.5 to 24.75, I'm risking 30 to 50 cents maximum above the high of the day. And at the same time, other people, if they're watching the same thing as me, they're going to start to step in that area, and we'll see it start to have trouble at 24.70. And what do we see on the 5-minute? We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars of where it cannot hold above 24.70. And that's where you can actually start to build a larger position. And the confirmation on this larger position is if that consolidation breaks to the downside and then the sellers start to hold below 24. And so this is kind of the micro level, kind of the lower risk where it's no longer just trending up on the lowest time frame. It's actually was trending. It's had a couple of hard big red bars. It's now moving sideways after the retracement. And what we're looking for is a break to the downside for on a micro level, 5-minute time frame, 5-minute chart, where those sellers to step down below 24. And maybe we're going to trend back down to, I'm looking at the midday. This thing broke out above 23. Maybe we'll get a move back down to 22.80, 23. And that's kind of step one. So here's our next chart. I just wanted to pull back, see bigger picture what it looks like. So notice we had the topping action around 130. That's when I tweeted it out in the mid 24s. It's come off to $24 a share. You can also see the sideways action on the retracement. Notice that it broke to the downside. And what we saw was it came down to 24 when it broke out of that consolidation. The next big move was down to, looks like around 23.30-ish or so. We get another retracement where it comes back up. If you're looking at this point to short retracements, 23.70 to 24, kind of where it broke from. That's going to be your next entry where you're looking for sellers to take control on an intraday basis. They're not in control on the multi-day basis yet, but on an intraday basis, they're starting to take control. And we know in the morning, the move, it started at 22, it consolidated at around 22.30 for about an hour and a half before moving up to 25. And at this point, my downside target really is just that consolidation area that I circled. That's my expectation. Once it gets down there, maybe you'll get some people looking to buy it because it's come back down to an area where it had a $2 up move from. It's also, if it gets below there, maybe you'll get some people to panic. It'll come down to the opening low. But regardless, my thought process is for this to have a larger retracement back down to $18 to $20 a share, it's going to take a few days. This right now is just a single day reversal where on day 2, we're going to look for a lower high to be put in place. And if that is, that's when we're going to look for some of the swing traders to start to exit. They'll get nervous. And before we know it, we'll get a larger retracement. And by the way, this stock went from 16 to 25. And in that initial breakout of 16, it got up to the 18, 19 area. So my thought is when it fails at 25 over the next 3 or 4 days, maybe it'll get back down to that 18 to 20. And so we'll kind of look. I have some charts for that as well. But on day one, it's behaved pretty well. This is a very common pattern. Morning high, pulls in, doesn't immediately reverse because no one's fearful. People are still like buyers in control. Makes the new high. It's after it makes the new high and comes down hard where we use the opening high. I've drawn the blue line there where we use that as our spot. And that's where a lot of experienced traders are shorting as well. And they know it's low risk. They know from the morning high to the when it got taken out is only about 30 cents of risk. And they know the morning low is still $2.50 lower. So it's a very good risk reward at this point. And maybe you walk into a swing short. So, and it actually worked out, I thought was best case scenario. It actually came all the way back down to 22.25. I believe I got flat into that, or maybe out of 80% of the position, thinking the next morning that it could retrace back up to maybe 23, 23 and a half. I tweeted out, by the way, the next morning after it had come off into the 22s, let's put this in perspective, meaning it had come off now about $2.50 from the high, but it still had not broken the steeper uptrend, and the more shallow uptrend had a ways to go. And this was just a reminder that to stick with this, we could see at least a few more dollars of downside. So zooming back in. So on day 2, what happened was it had closed down. On day 1, it had closed, I believe, below $23 a share and was gapping up in the pre-market to above 24, actually to 24 and a half or so. So because on day 1 it went from 25 all the way down to the low 22s, my thought was this was most likely the high. On day 1, I wasn't necessarily thinking that when I was getting in. I thought it actually could have one more day of up. And I was hoping it would have another day of up because the risk reward would have been even better on the pullback. But because we had that $2.50 down move in the afternoon, my thought was if we could get a pop back in the next pre-market into the 24 area, that would be a great entry against the prior afternoon's low. What happened was at 7 a.m., it was above 24. A bunch of traders on the desk started to short there. And what we saw was as the market opened, it just basically went straight down to $21 a share. Now, once I saw that weakness, I was thinking, okay, the top is in. We're looking for a series of lower highs. The one thing that I want to caution you on day 2, and I saw one trader get into a little bit of trouble, it worked out eventually, but they were very aggressively shorting as soon as it popped back up to 21.5, 22, didn't really give it a chance to kind of extend up a little bit into the 22.5, 23 area. I circled for you the area where I started to more aggressively short it, which was on day 1 when it had sold off, it bounced back into 23.30. In the morning when it had sold off, 23.30, the seller stepped down. So my thought process basically was, and by the way, I did get long that morning when it flushed through 21. Just I thought from a swing perspective, people would still try to bounce the stock. It bounced up to 23. I started to aggressively short it. I did not think it would get up to 24. You can actually see on the 10-minute here, it did extend all the way up to 24 for kind of a few minutes, but very quickly getting back down to 23 and then trending down for the next few hours. And the reason why I like to give it room is I found over the years, these buyers of momentum stocks, they just don't give up so easily. It's very rare that a stock it tops out and it just trends. Usually what happens is you get the most aggressive momentum people who were chasing it from 23 to 25, they start hitting out and that causes the initial down. And the people who are maybe chasing it from 21 to 22, those people on day 2, they start hitting out and it creates these vacuums, these air pockets where it comes down straight, but usually you get a chance you get like a 1 ATR bounce. And in this case, as I said, the ATR is around $2 on this one. Now, so you got a 21 to 23. Now, it did go up another half of an ATR before it settled in. If you want to trade this conservatively, the way we talked about on day 1, what you would look for is as it's going green here on the 5-minute from 21 to 23 is just wait for some red. And in this case, it didn't start to show red until it topped out at 24. There was a couple of red bars. Eventually, it consolidated there at 23 for about a half an hour, and then it broke down below 23, and that's when it came back down into the morning low before it found a bid. Let's take a look at day 3. On day 3, we had potential support at the morning lows and then also at the afternoon lows. And what you can see is right on the open, I have 2 areas that I would look potentially to short it. Number 1, at the afternoon resistance, I highlighted there with those 2 blue bars, 22, between 21.70 and 22. It kind of touched maybe the bottom of that upper area, so you had like a split second to short the strength on the open. If you did not catch that, then what you wanted to basically see was it take out the day 2 low. And at that point, by the way, swing traders are starting to hit the stock as well. They see it below that 2070, was the morning and the afternoon low. People are hitting it. Momentum traders are shorting it. And it came off pretty hard at that point from 2070 down to about $19. And at that point, that had really been my target. 19, 18.5, 19 had kind of been my downside target based on the 30-minute chart. You did get a pop back up from 19 or so until 2070, 2080, which had been the prior day support. That became resistance, and it slowly trended down the rest of the day on day 3. And so the other thing that we learn on this is day 1 is the trickiest. Day 2 should get a little bit easier. And day 3, as we're starting to see lower highs and lower lows, the momentum longs start to give up, and the people who are trading it on the short side get more aggressive. And so you start to get cleaner and cleaner trends. I wanted to check back in. I'm doing this video about a week later. I wanted to check back in with you to see kind of what it looks like. I've highlighted the longer term uptrend for you. It's now actually almost caught up to that, and it's continuing to make lower highs and kind of stabilize just below $19 a share. The way that I'm looking at this now basically is it can't hold above 21. It can't hold below 19 on the 30-minute. So eventually it's going to break in one direction or the other, and that will be the beginning of the next move. If it breaks to the downside, I would expect a move down to 17 to 17.5, and if it breaks to the upside, it will probably be something like 22 to 23. Not necessarily going back up to the high unless there's a strong news catalyst. To recap for you, this is how a safe approach to shorting momentum stocks that have been overextended. We zoom in on the intraday time frame to find spots where we can bring down our risk to a small fraction of an ATR. The safe entry is going to be generally after we see a morning high on the retest of that high. Sometimes it'll double top. Sometimes it will take out that morning high and then trade below it. That will be our initial entry. We want to, at most, risk a quarter of an ATR at that point. And we want to then look for price targets based on where it broke out from in the morning on any type of consolidation and the morning low. Those would be our initial targets. When we come in on day 2, we want to see a lower high, and we want to see from day 1 eventually the support taken out from day 1, and then we look at it as a swing perspective as a multi-day trade.